personalmente adquirí ciertos conocimientos relacionados con la ley extranjería.
Personally, I acquired some knowledge about the migration law and about rights. I was able to discover that I can combine my professional life with the social concerns that I've always had. And it truly helped me realize that there's something there that I needed to discover. And I also realized that in order to have a whole vision of the problems we are facing in our society, it's necessary to have a multidisciplinary approach and consider other areas of study. In my case, not only international affairs. I put a name and a last name to this reality that is closer to what we expect. And also I reflected about the privileges we have and the inequalities that are present even in Europe. Relations is something I was always worried about, particularly in my area of study, international affairs. But after having been involved more personally, it's something I cannot leave out of my daily life, and I'm more engaged as a citizen. And after this experience, I know that I can be more active as a citizen, and I can be part of the changes we want to obtain, not only in the area of relations, but I'm more engaged at a social level in general. The main objective of service learning is humanitarian assistance. I've been able to interact not only with the people, but also with carers to increase our service and identify certain positive approaches and beliefs framed in the acquisition of techniques, specialized and multidisciplinary approaches. It's undoubtedly a very gratifying experience and any professional should have the opportunity to evidence this. Service learning is to cover a social need thanks to what we've learned at university, and also learning more and reflecting along the process. It means putting into practice the values we believe in, and also putting into practice the learnings that I have acquired at university. So it's a first good opportunity to realize all I had learned at the university and that it all had a practical meaning. And it was also an experience that provided me with skills I can use in my professional life, such as teamwork or communicational skills.
Ще зі самого початку роботи над цим проєктом я зрозуміла, що він є надзвичайно важливим, оскільки в нас на Сході війна триває вже більше 6 років. І, на жаль, у нас є люди, які вже втомились від цієї війни, проте наші захисники, вони і надалі потребують нашої допомоги. Я зрозуміла, що цей проєкт – це одна з можливостей їм допомогти. Я є надзвичайно рада, що маю можливість bути частинкою цього проєкту та працювати далі у рамках цієї temy nad своją kursową robotą.
Jeśli chodzi o tą inicjatywę, zyskałam dzięki temu doświadczenie w kontakcie z drugim człowiekiem. Przede wszystkim wykorzystałam swoje umiejętności, które zdobyłam na studiach, do tego, żeby pomóc po prostu drugiemu człowiekowi w potrzebie.
Da es vielleicht in erster Linie nicht so zielführend wirken könnte, gerade auch jetzt im Sinne eines Projektes, ist es umso wichtiger, trotzdem die Meinung von anderen zu erfahren, weil irgendwas steckt dahinter und im Endeffekt ebnet das auch mehr Möglichkeiten, eine bessere Harmonie zusammenzuleben, besser zusammenarbeiten zu können. Und das ist sowohl beruflich als auch eben privat, was ich gelernt habe, zu sagen, ohne Vorurteile reinzugehen. Auch gerade Leute, die vielleicht eine sehr aus meiner Sicht, aus meiner bescheidenen subjektiven Sicht eigene Meinung pflegen, versuchen herauszufinden, was der Hintergrund dahinter ist, um auch den Menschen selbst besser verstehen zu können.
Przez hasło nauka poprzez służbę rozumiem zdobycie doświadczeń i umiejętności w trakcie służenia innym osobom.
Dlatego też zauważyłam większą otwartość co do niesienia pomocy nie tylko osobom potrzebującym czy też potencjalnym klientom, ale także sobie nawzajem, po prostu rówieśnikom. Dlatego uczenie się poprzez służbę to jest coś, co sprawia, że możemy nieść pomoc jeszcze w trakcie nauki. Możemy doświadczyć tego, że to, czego się uczymy, naprawdę przynosi korzyści i naprawdę jest potrzebne i ma sens. Dlatego warto brać udział w takich akcjach po to, żeby po prostu siebie rozwijać, ale także dzięki takim akcjom nieść pomoc osobom, które tego potrzebują wolontarystycznie.
Uniservitate and Universidad Católica Portuguesa invite you to participate in the second Global Symposium Uniservitate, Service Learning, Integral Education, Transformative Spirituality. With the participation of representatives from 26 countries from 5 continents, from more than 30 universities, and worldwide leading specialists. This second edition of the Uniservitate Symposium, aimed at educational authorities, researchers, faculty body, and university students, is a great opportunity to share experiences and reflections with experts, to discuss the contribution of service learning to the identity and mission of all higher education institutions, and to the empowerment of students as responsible agents of change. In response to Pope Francis's plea and in support of the Global Compact on Education, we call on you to contribute with your hands, head, and heart to continue creating novel and meaningful proposals that will help us face social challenges.
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. Welcome to the panel on Hands, Head, and Heart, Reflections on Service Learning, Integrated Education, and a Transformative Spirituality. This is our second day of conference, October 29, of the Global Symposium Uniservitate. This is the second day and an opportunity to share experiences, research, reflect, and debate on pedagogy of service learning, its spiritual dimension and contribution to identity and mission of higher education institutions. I am your moderator for this panel. I'm Marlon de Luna Era. I'm an associate professor and chair of the Department of Sociology and Behavioral Sciences of De La Salle University in Manila, Philippines. This panel will be for 1.5 hours. We have 4 panelists. Each panelist will be given 15 minutes. I hope our panelists will be conscious of this time allotted. So without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. Our first presenter is James Arthur. He is the director of the Jubilee Center for Character and Virtues. James is also chair of the Society for Educational Studies and was head of the School of Education 2010 to 2015 and deputy pro-vice chancellor 2015 to 2019. He was previously editor of the British Journal of Educational Studies for 10 years and holds numerous honorary titles in the academe, including honorary professor of the University of Glasgow and honorary research fellow in the University of Oxford. James was made an officer of the British Empire by the Queen in 2018. He has written widely on the relationship between theory and practice in education, particularly the links between character, virtues, citizenship, religion, and education. His recent book is The Formation of Character in Education from Aristotle to the 21st Century. James established the Jubilee Center in 2012, and the center has grown in size, scope, and impact since its launch at the House of Lords in May 2012. Recently, James was a visiting fellow at the Angelicum University in Rome and has written his 7th book on the Christian formation of character. Our second panelist is Michelle Sturck Barrett. She is the director of the J.D. Power Center of Liberal Arts in the World at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. She has been engaged with Catholic higher education for nearly 30 years, primarily with the Donnellan Office of Community-Based Learning at Holy Cross and the Paul's Program for Service Learning at Boston College. Michelle earned her BA in Psychology at Villanova University and her MA in Higher Education Administration at Boston College. She completed her PhD in Higher Education at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where her award-winning dissertation focused on the spiritual growth of undergraduates through service learning. She has been highly involved in the Association of Jesuit College and Universities, AJCU, network by participating in the Ignatian Colleagues Program, serving on visiting teams in the mission priority examine process, and serving as the chair of the AJCU Service Learning Professional Network. Our third panelist is Karen Venter. She heads the Service Learning Division within the Directorate of the Community Engagement at the University of the Free State, South Africa. Having an MA in Higher Education Studies with specialization in the field of community engaged service learning, she is responsible for the institutionalization of engaged scholarship and global networking to advance higher education engagement. Karen has presented various national and international conference papers and workshops, co-published journal articles, and book chapters. Through applying appreciative inquiry as strength-based action research methodology, her doctorate research focuses on using an integrated service learning practice approach to flourish professional learning and development of all partners in community university research partnerships. This approach integrates the functions of teaching, learning, research, and community engagement, as well as theory and practice across discipline and societal sectors to deliver the practice of the engaged scholars. Our last, but definitely not the least panelist, Ana Maria de Costa Oliveira. She has a PhD in social work from the Portuguese Catholic University. She is currently a pedagogical coordinator in the Master in Social Work and an assistant professor of the Faculty of Human Sciences of the Portuguese Catholic University. She coordinates the post-graduation of evaluation in programs and social projects of artistic practices and social inclusion and management of projects in cooperation for development. She is a researcher at the Católica Research Center for Psychological, Family, and Social Well-being. Her areas of publication and research are in social innovation, social intervention, intervention with families, youth, theories for practice in social work, and social and intellectual mediation. Consultant, she is also a consultant in the areas of planning, management, and evaluation of programs and projects, territorial strategic planning, leadership, and team management. Her publishing areas are located in the intervention areas with young people in social work, theories and practices, and in social and intercultural mediation, where the following books stand out: The Strength Theory, a referential for practice in social intervention in 2016, The Turn of the Arrow, Positive Factors in the Lives of Young People at Risks, 2010, and Sociocultural Mediation in Portugal, a puzzle under construction in 2005. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are distinguished panelists. So may I request our first panelist to share his presentation. James Arthur, please.
My name is James Arthur. I'm a professor at the University of Birmingham in England. Although I'm not from England, I'm a Scot who works in England educating the English. So as director of the Jubilee Centre, we do a great deal of research into the character of young people. And that's the character of young people in universities and also in schools and indeed into the professions. A great deal of service learning takes place among young professionals in the jobs that they take on as well. We should be conscious of that. It doesn't end in a university. It doesn't start in the university. It often starts in schools, most of the university, and it continues for many young people and adults as well throughout their life. So I want to say something about service learning and its connection with character, but I do so from the point of view of secular university. I'm not in a Catholic university, I'm in a secular university, and we produce this framework, Character Education in Universities, which contains a section on service learning. So this document is available on our website, which you can have a look at. Basically, if we listen to graduation speeches, not just in Catholic universities, you know, around the world, often in secular universities, they quote John Henry Newman. His idea of a university is often quoted, and it's often, you know, quotes in university websites and mission statements. And it's clear that today's universities and all of their diversity are eager to encourage students in directions that help them lead flourishing lives. They want people to be happy and they want them to be good citizens and make a significant contribution to life. So these professionals that leave the universities or become professionals, they want them to be good human beings. You might wonder what type of human being they have in mind. But this is really a major question for Catholic universities as well. So I want to begin by saying something about the context that we're in. There are many serious concerns in higher education, and many of them are interconnected. I think one of the most important problems we have is that we live in an age which is almost wholly instrumental, rationalistic, and also materialistic. And this philosophy that dominates, this positivist philosophy that dominates higher education, turns many institutions into businesses, turns them into corporate entities that are really seeking to make a profit. Even when they're non-profit making institutions, they tend to be thinking of the balance sheet. Now, education in this sense has been reduced to technique. It's been reduced to sort of just simply teaching particular modules, teaching particular courses, particular content for a particular outcome. And this is problematic because this is a very mechanical view of higher education. And what happens then is that education is perceived as a means for social success, a doorway, as it would be, to socio-economic upward mobility. In other words, people go to universities for their CVs, for their career, and to move on. Now, that in itself is not a bad thing, but But if that's the primary purpose of a university, then it's a very diminished sense of education. I would like to say that when students engage in meaningful acts of service, there is a double benefit, and we've discovered this through our research and through our practice in the Jubilee Centre. So they make a contribution to the good of society and they build their character. So in other words, it's not just them contributing to society. Society is contributing to them and how they build their character, how they form themselves. Service to others, therefore, is an important virtue that has to be cultivated in students. Now, the Christian faith conviction that we as humans have a common tell us that there is an ultimate common good or highest good, that is God, is central to any Catholic concept of service. The practice of the virtues, therefore, through service, is the road to this spiritual end. Now, a key point we have to recognize here is that a Catholic university is not Catholic because it puts a crucifix on the wall or because it has a good pastoral system. It should have all of those things, or even if it has a service program. That does not make it Catholic. It doesn't make it Christian or Catholic. Many Catholic institutions claim that service learning is at the center and at the heart of their Catholic identity, and is often commonly expressed in their mission statements. However, secular and other faith universities also have service learning programs and have outstanding examples of service learning. My own university, which is a secular university, has extremely good service learning programs for all of its students if they wish to participate. Now, Catholic institutions have no monopoly, therefore, in service learning. They can't claim any monopoly in this area. They don't have any monopoly in serving the poor and the marginalized, because other universities do the same. Students and graduates in a Catholic university should they have a greater commitment to service learning? Should they be more concerned about serving the vulnerable, the marginalized? And if so, can they explain why they should be and what the Catholic difference would be? It's not the case that all education is ultimately used in the service of others. It is also not the case that the Catholic view of service learning is radically different from secular, because it has a significant anthropology. In other words, if Catholic education or Catholic service learning is to be different, then it must have a different notion of the anthropology of the human being. It must have a different notion of human development. And so my question is, what is that notion of human development that the Catholic institution seeks to promote? Service learning should aim to form people so they can live well in a world worth living in. The Christian faith conviction that we as humans have a common purpose and that there is an ultimate common good is absolutely central to this. Only through such a life of virtue, of living the virtues, can a person truly flourish as a human being. The good in the good life is common to us all, and by virtue of our common or shared nature. The common good is therefore defined in terms of the flourishing of all in society, not some, but all. The implication for the purposes of education in a university is that they should encourage and promote the common virtues by which all human beings ought to live if they are to flourish or realize the common good. Virtues are constitutive of the good life, and the goal of all education is about forming people so they can live well in a world worth living in, as I said already. We are human beings because we are made in the image of God, and this is central to the Christian understanding of service. This image of God idea is the basis for our relational capacity with one another and with God himself. It is therefore by good acts that human beings contribute to the formation and understanding of their service learning, and each person must decide whether they wish God's image to be reflected in them by cooperating with God's grace. There's a wide gap between knowing and doing. Service to others is not secured through an intellectual education alone, but requires prayer. Any idea of the spiritual in terms of service learning must involve prayer. It must involve communal worship. And it also involves a certain degree of sacrifice on behalf of the student. Human beings need more than information. They need motivation, which faith can provide. Now, service learning is indeed a concrete way of putting into action gospel values, but it's also a spiritual exercise guided by Catholic social teaching. This can only be achieved through prayer and spiritual renewal, which allows the Holy Spirit to work within us so that we can pray in solidarity with those who are vulnerable. Human beings have a natural inclination to follow and pursue the good. In other words, we have a natural capacity to discern between good and evil. Good is done when a person acts in a way that is authentically human, and a good life makes flourishing possible. So the notion of Christian service transcends the temporal, the material, and the secular, and points towards the eternal, the spiritual, and the religious. It is not simply about what I ought to do, but also what I ought to be and become. It's a transformative process. Christians are called by God to serve, and Catholic universities promote an integral human development that seeks the all-round flourishing of every person and community. So in summary, the Christian notion and practice of service is unique because its source is our restoration in Christ. It is about modeling Christ-like virtues, particularly his servanthood, and is motivated by God's love. Service learning is understood in the light of Christ and the Catholic faith, which transforms it. So service learning is a form of Christian witness and also a form of evangelization. Graduates of Catholic institutions are expected to have a commitment to Christ's command to serve in a just, love-affirming, liberating, and life-giving way. Service learning programs in Catholic universities must therefore have a theological underpinning that serves a spiritual purpose. So my whole point here is to say that we must go further than simply doing the service. We need good reasons for doing it, and the students who are involved in it need to have a clear theology of why they're involved in service learning that aligns with our faith. And this is absolutely central. So my main point really is that service learning obviously is great, but what distinguishes a Catholic university from a secular service learning is that we have a different reason for our involvement in service, which enhances and helps us flourish in a spiritual way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor James Arthur, for the very thought-provoking presentation. Okay, so we will request our audience and the panel, other panel members to note their questions, and we will do it. We will entertain the questions after all the presentations. Once again, thank you very much, Professor James Arthur. So let's now move on to the next presentation. May we call on Michelle Stark-Barrett.
Great, thank you, James. I think you'll find much of what I have to say really it parallels very much what James is saying, a different perspective on the same topic here. So during my presentation today, I'll discuss the topics outlined on this slide with an overall focus on how service learning effectively supports Catholic higher education institutions in living their mission. So in looking at themes within Catholic higher education mission statements across the US, one notices some consistency. Most prominent among the consistencies is the promotion of holistic student development, a commitment to diversity, and a commitment to service, justice, and the common good. As one example of what I mean by this, I'll just take Georgetown University's mission statement, and it says, the university was founded on the principle that serious and sustained discourse among people of different faiths, cultures, and beliefs promotes intellectual, ethical, and spiritual understanding. We embody this principle in the diversity of our students, faculty, and staff, our commitment to justice and the common good. Georgetown educates men and women to be responsible and active participants in civic life and to live generously in service to others. These consistencies among mission statements across institutions is not surprising, as their aims are intimately connected to principles within Catholic social teaching. They focus on the common good rather than individual self-interest. They demonstrate a respect for the dignity of all people by embracing diversity and pursuing efforts to overcome conditions such as poverty that demean human dignity. And their focus on holistic student development is also intertwined with human dignity by valuing and caring for the full of who our students are, not just their minds. Whether it is stated explicitly or not, the mission statements aim to educate students who will be in solidarity with the most vulnerable among us. And as I will discuss, service learning deeply connects to these themes. So as noted, one of the most prominent themes is the focus on holistic student development. This begs the question, how does effective holistic student development occur? And I'd like to share just a few perspectives from prominent leaders and educational theorists on this topic. So in public statements, Pope Francis consistently calls upon educators to speak the language of the heart, mind, and hands in the educational process. For example, in September of 2018, he spoke to a global gathering of educators and stated, education engages the whole person, not only the head. I've said this many times and I'll repeat it. There is a language of the head, but there is also a language of the heart, of sentiment. You need to educate the heart, and there's also the language of the hands. These are the three languages that go together, and the young people are called on to think about what they feel and do, and to feel what they think and do, and to do what they feel and think. Saint Ignatius, the founder of the Jesuits, provided a model of education that similarly integrates experience, reflection, and action in a dynamic interplay that ultimately shapes the habits, values, and thinking of students and propels them from knowledge to action in service to the common good. John Dewey was a prominent educational philosopher in the United States, and he spoke consistently of the value of integrating experience into the educational process, as well as the importance of integrating the head and the heart in the educational process. And David Kolb is often cited for his experiential learning model that proposes that the most effective learning follows a cycle of concrete experience, followed by reflection on that experience, then thinking abstractly and conceptually about what one observed in those experiences, and then finally going back and putting that theory or abstract conceptualization back into practice with experimentation and just following that cycle continuously. And then more recently, Laura Rendon speaks of the importance of integrating intuition, introspection, and the inner life with intellectual development to promote deep learning, especially for students from diverse backgrounds. And longer standing than all of these are the words of Aristotle from Nicomachean Ethics, where he articulates that the central role that experience plays in education, in saying, for the things which we have to learn, we learn by doing. And though these authors are not explicitly naming service learning, their ideas implicitly endorse this pedagogical method and the way it utilizes experience and reflection to integrate hands, hearts, and minds in the educational process. So one key component of holistic student development is spiritual development. However, despite the central importance of spiritual development within Catholic higher education, it's often compartmentalized into a campus ministry office rather than being integrated into the academic core of the institution. And I personally really believe it's imperative that spiritual growth opportunities are available and integrated across educational experiences, not siloed in this way, particularly now at the present time, as we've seen a sharp decline in mental health indicators among young adults. Especially because numerous studies have found a correlation between psychological well-being and increased levels of spirituality. At the same time, recent years have seen decreasing interest and involvement in religion among young adults. So therefore, colleges and universities cannot assume that traditional approaches to religion will provide opportunities for spiritual development in the way they might have at one time. And this is a gap that needs to be addressed more adequately by colleges and universities. So service learning provides an avenue to address that gap, as numerous studies provide evidence that the pedagogical approach of service learning can foster spiritual growth within an academic context. The most prominent and comprehensive of these studies was conducted by Aston, and Lindholm. To measure spirituality and religiosity among undergraduates, they developed what they called the College Student Beliefs and Values Survey, or the CSBV. And this was taken by over 100,000 first-year students, and then again by a subsample of 15,000 students during their junior year. Results indicate that most measures of spirituality on their CSBV did not increase for students generally, for undergraduates during their time in college. And in fact, some of these measures even declined. However, they found that service learning participation had powerful positive impacts on results. My own dissertation research similarly explored whether there was a relationship between service learning participation and spiritual growth, and also sought to further understand what conditions might foster this growth. So in my study, I had 272 students complete the CSBV that was created by Aston, and Lindholm. And they completed it at the beginning of their year when they began with the Boston College Pulse program. And then they took that survey 9 months later as they were finishing their year with Boston College Pulse program. And in looking at those pre-test, post-test results, we found that about 80% of students grew spiritually, which was consistent with their self-report on whether they grew spiritually during the year. I then followed that up by interviewing some students who had grown really significantly in their measures, and then some who hadn't grown quite so much. To learn about their differences in their experiences and try and understand what might be facilitating that spiritual growth. And what I found in the interviews is one of the major differences between those who had grown and those who hadn't was the existence of strong relationships and consistent interaction with people at their service sites. These relationships led students to hear stories that presented perspectives they otherwise would not have heard. And students described this experience as eye-opening. I heard that phrase over and over in the interviews of how eye-opening it was in the way it contradicted their preconceived notions of people who were facing poverty, addiction, mental illness, homelessness, and lack of educational success. Students grew to really care about the people they met at their service sites, and then subsequently cared about the injustice and the suffering that they faced. At the same time, students spoke of how the class they were taking back on the Boston College campus exposed them to new perspectives through the readings they were doing in class, through the discussions they were having in class, and through the opportunity to hear the perspectives and stories of other service experiences that students were having in their class. Students described this experience as emotionally overwhelming, and that overwhelming nature of it led to deep reflection as they tried to make sense of the complex questions they were facing without easy answers. Now, a key component of this possibility for growth was that students were really well supported as they faced those challenges. Their class provided the opportunity for supportive relationships with professors and peers, student leaders provided support, and then they also had a theoretical framework to look at some of these questions through the readings and through the class, presentations, papers, etc. So in talking about the aims of Jesuit higher ed more broadly, Father Peter Hans Kovenbach, who was the former Superior General of the Jesuits, had a quote that I think just fits perfectly with what I witnessed these students experiencing. And he said, when the heart is touched by direct experience, the mind may be challenged to change. Personal involvement with innocent suffering, with the injustice others suffer, is the catalyst for solidarity, which then gives rise to intellectual inquiry and moral reflection. To me, this quote really succinctly describes what I witnessed occurring in my research, but also what I've observed in nearly 2 decades of working with service learning students. Now, research has similarly demonstrated that service learning can support some of the other aspects of Catholic higher ed mission statements that I referred to earlier. And the most comprehensive literature review of service learning outcomes occurred in 2001. This was conducted by a group of scholars at Vanderbilt. And they found so many really important incomes from service learning, but those that relate the most to our topic for today was they found that studies were consistently finding service learning had a positive relationship to moral development, to a sense of social responsibility, and to citizenship skills, all of which would support our goals of fostering a commitment to service, justice, and the common good in Catholic higher ed. Now, in terms of diversity, another one of those goals in our mission statements, studies have also demonstrated a relationship between service learning, participation, and retention of students from diverse backgrounds. Studies also point to greater interest in service learning among students of color. Relatedly, research has demonstrated that racially minoritized faculty and female faculty have higher rates of participation in community engaged scholarship and teaching. At the College of the Holy Cross, my colleague Isabel Jenkins and I conducted research to explore the experiences of racially minoritized students in our own service learning classes, or as we called it, Holy Cross Community-Based Learning, or CBL for short. And we reviewed the results of over 1,500 surveys from nearly 60 different community-based learning classes between 2012 and 2017. We then followed up these surveys with interviews with about a dozen students. And results demonstrated that there were consistently higher mean responses from racially minoritized students than white students on many of the variables we were measuring, but these were statistically significant for three particular variables. One, including CBL in this course enabled me to learn more deeply than I otherwise might have. Two, I learn better when I apply class material to real experience. And three, I could have benefited from additional opportunities to discuss my CBL experience in class. That, of course, pointing to the desire to have CBL more integrated into the classes, even than it was. Interestingly, these last two variables also had a statistically significant difference between male and female responses. Interviews were then conducted with 13 students from racially minoritized backgrounds, 9 of whom also identified as first generation college students. And every one of these interviewees, without prompting, referred to a community-based learning class as being among their most memorable and valuable learning experience in either their high school or their college experience. Consistent themes from the interviews explain why students felt so positively about community-based learning, including that there were parallels between their learning preferences and the way that the pedagogical method of CBL works, characteristics and actions of their CBL professors that they found to be distinct from some other classes, a desire to serve, and ability to relate, empowerment, and being valued for their assets. I'd just like to elaborate further on a few of these to explain them. Students consistently reported appreciating the opportunity to help mentor and support people who they could relate to in the community. And the ability to identify with those they met at community-based organizations meant that their CBL sites sometimes felt more like home than the predominantly white Holy Cross student body, and that being in the community could help ground them when they felt dissonance between their former home life and their current life at Holy Cross. Students also spoke about the ways in which CBL was empowering by building their confidence in the classroom, initiating desired classroom conversations, enabling them to see how much value they brought to the community partners because of their ability to relate, and by helping them to better understand societal injustices that had negatively impacted their own families and their own communities during their upbringing. Consistent throughout these themes was the concept of students being seen through an asset-based lens that saw the gifts they had to offer rather than the deficit-based perspective that had framed many of their prior educational experiences. Our mission statements at Catholic higher ed institutions not only focus on fostering holistic student development, a commitment to service and justice, but they also consistently focus on a commitment to diversity. And while many of our schools have been successful in diversifying our student bodies, this does not always translate to a feeling of inclusion for people from diverse backgrounds. Study findings like those outlined above demonstrate how service learning may be a potential avenue to foster greater inclusivity on our campuses. At the same time, it's important that service learning classes be led with intentionality and care to avoid further marginalizing racially minoritized students by centering and normalizing the experiences of white students in class discussions and reflections as written about by Tania Mitchell. So in conclusion, I'd just like to add a personal perspective. Not only have I considered these questions from a scholarly point of view and seen the power of Catholic higher ed and service learning to transform the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of students with whom I've worked, my life has similarly been transformed by both. And for that, I'm forever grateful to my undergraduate institution, Villanova, the post-grad year of service that followed my time at Villanova, and the professional opportunities I've had at Regis College, Boston College, and the College of the Holy Cross, along with the professional opportunities through the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities. My personal commitment to the common good, service, justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion really would not exist without having experienced the mission of Catholic higher education so alive in my own life. So thank you for your attention, and let me.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, let's move on to our next presenter. Karen Venter, please. Okay, well, while waiting for Karen, thank you so much, Michelle. I think the presentation of James is somewhat similar to some similarities in your presentation. I remember him mentioning about service learning as like Christian witnessing and evangelism, and somehow it contributed to spiritual growth. No? Service learning contributing to spiritual growth. Okay, so all right.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, Karen, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to share in this panel the perspectives on service learning. And in relation to the hands, head, and heart, this reflections on service learning speaks to integral education and transformative spirituality. I'm Karen Venter, and I work at the University of the Free State in South Africa. So I just want to be able to go on. There we are. So where am I? You can see within this whole network, I am there, and I live in the center of South Africa. And our university has got 7 faculties, and we have service learning modules that serves across the faculties. Some of the faculties have more service learning modules than others, specifically health and humanities, but we do have service learning integrated across the faculties in programs, modules, and therefore we also have a support services office from where we then support the service learning and the community integration. We have a multi-campus model where we have 3 campuses, and specifically service learning is then implemented on the Bloemfontein and on the Kwakwa campus. We also have a South campus. So I would like to share with regards to the transformation that took place in South Africa and also at our institution with regards to community engagement. South Africa in the post-apartheid era focused on transformation in higher education, and therefore since 1997 until now we have undergone severe transformation, where we started off with community service. We entered into a phase of community engagement, and now at the moment since 2018 we have transformed and integrated community engagement with scholarship. So you can see our model, how it has moved and progressed. And so for me it is important, the reason why we do community engagement and more specific service learning, it's about the responsiveness to societal challenges. It is to bring positive change in society, to change society, to have societal impact for community development, also towards social justice and the common good. And as one of the functions, public service in alignment with teaching, learning and research, then enables our focus on service learning and then the graduate attributes that are being met through service learning. Our current model, we have transformed it, that we have 3 pillars in it within engaged scholarship, and that then involves engaged teaching learning, engaged research and engaged citizenship. And it is in this domain of engaged teaching and learning that we have established community service learning. We also focus on integration, and if it is possible that across all 3 pillars, the integration can take place. I will also later on, with regards to the PhD study that I have undertaken, show how I have integrated engaged research and engaged teaching and learning. So we have it founded, our engaged scholarship is founded in community engagement context, and we make use of a triad sector partnership model where we have the community, university and service sector. We do not directly enter into community, but we work through a service provider and service sector, which can include the government, non-government organizations, industry, and even micro enterprises. Then within the higher education sector, there is where we find the higher education staff and students that then partner with the community. It is important to define engaged scholarship and then from there community engagement in the context, and it aligns quite a lot with Boyer's model of engaged scholarship, which refers to the application of academic scholarly work and professional expertise with an intended public purpose and mutual benefit that demonstrates engagement with external, and that includes non-academic constituencies. It aims to generate new knowledge, to integrate, apply, and disseminate knowledge. Then moving to the definition of community engagement, we see community engagement as continuously negotiated reciprocal collaborations and partnerships between the University of the Free State and our partner communities, which then include local, regional, or state, national, and global, that it directly interacts with, aimed at mutually beneficial co-construction, application, exchange of knowledge, information, skills, expertise, and resources required to advance the academic project of the university and to promote sustainable development in society. I would also like to define how we see service learning. We perceive it as an educational approach involving curriculum-based credit-bearing learning experiences in which our students participate in contextualized, well-structured and organized service activities aimed at addressing identified service needs in a community, and also focusing, as you will see, we are looking at service needs, but working from an asset-based community development approach. And then also reflect on service experiences in order to gain a deeper understanding of the linkage between the curriculum content and community dynamics, as well as achieve personal growth and a sense of social responsibility. It therefore requires a collaborative partnership, as I have explained, that enhances mutual reciprocal teaching and learning among all members of the partnership, which then includes lecturers, students, members of communities, and representatives of the service sector. Therefore, we need to define communities, and thereby we refer to specific collective interest groups conjoined in their search for sustainable solutions to development challenges that participate or could potentially participate as partners in the similarly inclined community engagement activities of the university, contributing substantially to mutual search for sustainable solutions to jointly identify challenges and service needs through the utilization of a full range of resources at our disposal. We have also institutionalized engaged scholarship, and there in the middle you can see that within our vision of the university, which states that the University of the Free State is a research-led, student-centered and regional engaged university that contributes to development and social justice through the production of globally competitive graduates and knowledge. And how do we do that? In our fourth goal, we support development and social justice through engaged scholarship. And we do that by increasing the number of academic staff who are involved in engaged scholarship, and in this context, in service learning. Increase the opportunities for our students engaged in community-based education, and to prioritize engaged scholarship in the UFS funding model. So how do we do the service learning? As I mentioned, in the pillar of engaged teaching and learning, and when possible, we also underpin the service learning with action-oriented and participatory research, which can include community-based research, participatory action learning, action research, and applied research. So therefore, the establishment of community university research partnerships is then confluent to this, for it is a joint research initiative between the university and the community, where both are equal partners and co-owners of the research process, as well as the research output. We have got 77 service learning modules across the faculties, and we've got 150 long-standing partnerships. And within these, we have 11 flagships that is situated in the different faculties. So I would like to share the example that we have of an overarching service learning annual-based project that we apply at the university. So where we, in partnership with a community partner, organize an annual learning festival, which is an inclusive educational event that offers opportunities for all people to come together on an equal platform to share, learn, and extend skills, knowledge, and expertise leading to a sustainable livelihood. It focuses on activities that aim to promote access to lifelong learning and action learning, access to establishment of networks for development, skills transfer and growth, sustainable livelihood, self-employment, business development, balance in the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, caring and social capital development, conversion and positive socio-economic and environmental change, and therefore also enhancement of the dual economy. I would like to share a video in this regard.
South Africa has been built with one of the keystones. You'll remember South Africa was built with an idea of reconciliation, nation building, reconstruction and development. And the purpose of government in 1994 was that individuals, communities must take responsibility and charge of their own development. And this Indaba is saying to people, do not rely on somebody else having to improve your own life. Take charge of your own development, empower yourself, make a difference in your own life. There's many expectations that government or private sector do things for people. And unfortunately, now in our country, we see people who are disappointed because they've located their own development and given it over to other people. So within Indaba, we say, take responsibility. You have the power, you have the energy, you have the gift, you have the talent to change your own life.
I think never in our lives we should stop learning. So opportunities like these create the platform for learning to continue no matter how old you are. We have such a big population here, from small children to middle-aged and old-age people. So never stop learning, and use platforms like these where everyone can come together, and it's an open opportunity for you to learn, whether you have had a background in learning or not.
Ek wil graag die vader se hart vir sy kinders demonstreer. En dis hoekom dit ook deel van the Father Heart series is. Want ons wil graag hê mense moet hier hoop kom vind. Hulle moet hier iets kom vind om hulle lewe te kan verander. Ek sal baie graag wil hê hierdie gedagte moet uitkring sodat ons dit kan dupliseer in gemeenskappe waar daar regtig geen hoop is nie. So ons is nou hier in die stad en die meeste mense in die stad het 'n oplossing. Hy het een of ander iets wat hy doen. Maar daar's gedeeltes van ons provinsie waar daar niks gebeur nie en ons sal dit graag daar wil dupliseer.
So today is a very cool opportunity. It's the Learning Festival, and what's happening is actually really something very amazing. We're bridging all gaps and between disability and not disabled, and different socio-economic groups and cultures and languages and people who are skilled and not skilled, and everyone's coming together and really just learning.
Daar is 'n geweldige groot groep mense daar buite wat heeltemal hoop opgegee het. Hulle glo hulle gaan nie meer werk kry nie. En dis juis hulle wat ons hier wil kry. En dis juis vir hulle wat ons wil hoop gee en idees gee.
So we've got innovation for wealth creation and we've got social innovation, but there's only one component of innovation, and that is when you bring all of those together and you say, well, how do you take the country forward with a dual economy? And this is exactly what this Learning Festival is about.
The vibe that I'm getting and what's going to happen here today, I think it's very exciting. Everyone is excited and has really come with the prospect and the idea of learning. So it's really a wonderful opportunity and a very festive feel going on.
So thank you for
Karen,
watching.
can you wrap up? Can you wrap up, please?
Yes, I'm wrapping up. So herewith, I'm sharing the framework of the PhD that I conducted, where I'm sharing that following an integrated service learning practice approach for flourishment of professional development, where we connect service learning, appreciative inquiry, and then also appreciative leadership. It is based on a shared values, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment, which enables flourishment and positive change. And then this is driven by a self-directed lifelong career pathway for engaged scholarly professional development, and from local to global, and where we connect with the head and the heart and the hands. And this aligns definitely with the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm ending off with a slide that shares the websites of our community engagement and service learning, and also aligning with resources that you can look at that we follow at the university. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen, for that insightful presentation. And I think we spent a little more time. So let's move on to the last, definitely not the least panelist, Ana Maria de Costa Oliveira.
Thank you, Marlon. Me permitís, pero voy a hablar en español porque es más confortable.
If you allow me, I'm going to speak in Spanish. I feel more comfortable. I wanted to send my greetings from Portugal, special greetings from here. So I'm going to share, and it's very good having heard to all of you before, because now I can, cross our perspectives and experiences and share them from our reflections. And the truth is that what I bring is my personal reflection that is based on research. But this is questions rather than answers. And the first one is this one. We have to learn how to teach in the 21st century. What does that mean? What challenges are involved in this teaching? And the truth is that the university, is it presented as a place of new possibilities? We have this quote by Tedesco. It says that good quality education is that which meets or complies with the two essential pillars, learning to learn and learning to live together. There are 4 pillars actually, but these are the 4 pillars that sustain all the others. And for me, this is a very significant challenge. That is looking at our universities and understanding how we can turn the university into a space of reference to educate, to teach, to share, to grow together in an integral education, not only of the students, but of the educational community as a whole and of society as a group working and walking together. So in that sense, there's something we already know that research has already shown. And the first thing is that education today, through all the transformations we've been through, should guide all the efforts to create conditions that allow the new generations to acquire the necessary competencies to live in a sustainable manner, both at 3 levels: personal, work, and community level. Research also tells us that education should not be just a transmission of knowledge, but it should promote the growth and the maturity of the youth. And it also tells us, in the words of Pope Francis, that education is closely connected to the humanization process and therefore to all the anthropological and existential aspects. And this has implications, and that is that we need to generate spaces of encounter, knowing the youth of today and the ways of thinking, feeling, and acting, so we can adapt our education. So in that sense, my question is this one. Who are the youth we have at university today? Because the truth is that speaking about service learning, for me, is also asking what service learning we want today in the 21st century. Because it brings a new methodology that can respond or not to the characteristics of the youth today. So who are they? We have, and I've brought mainly the 2 latest generations. We have the millennials and Generation Z, as we call it. With millennials, we have a generation that is more focused than any other. They're abstract, they're curious, global, they're very connected. And that's why they bring us big questions. They stand in front of us asking for something else, not just knowledge, not just knowledge disguised as experience. But Generation Z is the first group of individuals that were born digital. I mean, they are connected, they're mobile, and they've never seen the world without the internet. So here we are speaking of a generation that is hyper cognitive, that can live in person or in a digital world at the same time. They don't divide things. Technology allows them to live different realities and absorb a huge complexity with a lot of information, mainly visual information, and many resources that they control in their lives. Through the different applications, they anticipate, they simplify, and they want to solve specific problems. They live in a world of sensations and of experience. That is, they are guided by an openness to relationships, and they are deeply affected by emotions and by experience. That's why normally they reject anything they are not attracted to or they are not captivated by. What does not respond to your tastes or what doesn't have an immediate reward to the Z generation. That is the generation we have at universities. So what is monotonous or repetitive, that's not what they want. And that's why they are very alert to new experiences, different experiences. And they are very autonomous in the management of their relationships and in their management of time. They are the youth of the today and now. They're not so interested in the past or the future because they want to live it and experience it now. The literature says or identifies 6 features of these youth. Very briefly, in a quick overview, they are pragmatical. I mean, they are very practical. They try to meet their financial needs and their personal wealth. They are very indefinite because they challenge the stereotypes, and they are not so worried about the gender definitions. They're very open to diversity, and they deconstruct the labels. They are very talkative. They don't see the difference. I mean, they use dialogue, but with technology to mainly share among them, but to share with the world. They have what we call the real selfies. I mean, after the millennials that made selfies as an artificial construct of reality, these youth of the Generation Z have a certain hangover of the social media. So they are more spontaneous in what they post. They are communaholics. I mean, they move around in many different communities and networks, and they enjoy that. That is, their interest is widely connected with diversity. And finally, they are mem thinkers. I mean, they use a coded message to exercise their critical capability with mood and with certain lightness. These youth of today are the ones we have at universities and the ones we have to educate. So what happens, in my point of view, is that very often we are crystallized or focused in the objectives and the practices, and we are not updated. So my next question would be, what education is necessary for this profile of youth? And we have 3 areas that are very clear. We have to help then this profile to develop a series of attitudes and values, but mainly teaching them to think critically. We will see how, but clearly the analysis, the criticism, thinking about reality and themselves. Then awareness of the world that surrounds them so that they can feel leading actors that are capable of changing reality and generate in them and with them a new lifestyle that is having consistency between the affectionate dimension or the feeling, the cognitive or thinking, and the behavior or the action. But how is this done? The OECD, I don't know if you've seen this, but by 2030, they have set clear challenges for education. And if you pay attention to this, you can see that we have knowledge, attitudes, values, and skills. That is, clearly, we are speaking of new values, paying attention to new aspects. So it's a new way of being and a new way of teaching. So what's the place for service learning here? From our point of view, it is the methodology that can best respond to the profile of these youth. Although we have to think of how we can better realize it. I mean, what is it in service learning today that we have to change as well in order to better respond to these profiles? But we know that there are three features in service learning practices that research has shown as something that is consolidated. The leading role of the students, the focus on collaborating with the community, the solution of concrete problems, and this practical connection of the content, the learning content in the curricula, and the service practices. And these features mark the difference in the teaching. We also know that there are impacts that have already been studied as a result of this methodology. And these impacts are on learning, on the insertion in the labor world, on the ethical formation, and on social and political participation. I mean, we already know that this is the truth, but the biggest impact that perhaps we could mention is the impact on the personal change, and that is the purpose that they find, as James mentioned, the purpose they find in the why and the what for of their studies. So the answers that they look for about who they are, who they want to be, what they do, and with what they do, what world we all want to build. And this is the biggest impact that perhaps the methodology can provide. So very simply, they say that the most successful experience in service learning has 4 components: personal and interpersonal development, the application of knowledge learned, the transformation of the perspective, that is seeing the world differently, and the development of a sense of citizenship. But how can we do this? By giving them significant references. I mean, this is not just a different way of doing this, but it's very clear that we have to give them new references. We have to respect their pace without trying to speed up the maturity process they have to go through. We have to educate for engagement. We have to help them develop a decision-making process that implies accepting responsibility for the consequences and even the failure, the error of their actions, and then starting over again. And also encouraging them to be part of the decisions that affect them and not being afraid of confronting them and helping them in this process about themselves, about reality. Helping them by being in contact with their inner self, getting to know themselves and affirming who they are, helping them reflect critically about themselves and their surroundings, helping them to live the different dimensions of their lives, but with a balance, adopting and integrating the difference, and cultivating dialogue as a tool, as an essential tool that promotes other skills, not formatting the thinking. And this, we think, allows us to achieve a truly transformational learning that is based on 3 big pillars: reflection as a key aspect of service learning, but clearly an element of educational innovation that is continuous, connected, and contextualized. Self-awareness, awareness of the other, of reality. And this is not improvised. This is raised gradually. And finally, engagement, participation, the real participation, involving them in the responsibility of the process, engagement, and openness. And this is what we wanted to share. Thank you for the possibility. I don't know, I have no more time, but the idea is to look at service learning as a technological innovation that allows us to attract the interest of the student, but also their specific education as men and the women of tomorrow. That is allowing them to develop also their own personal engagement, but also their social and political engagement, so that they are true agents for social change. Thank you so much for your attention, and apologies for my Spanish that is not perfect.
All right. Thank you so much, Ana Maria de Costa Oliveira, for that interesting presentation, focusing on the future leaders of our world. All right. So, so that's the last presentation. I think if we have time to engage for reflections, dialogue, any insights from the presentations? I think Professor James left already, more or less. But okay, anyone would like to?
I'll respond to what Anna just said. That first of all, I love that you, off the top of your head, clearly had it memorized, talking about reflection being continuous, connected, contextualized, because one of the co-authors of that work was my dissertation chair, Dwight Giles. So he'll be excited to know that that's being utilized around the world. But, you know, Anna's presentation really reminded me of something that, you know, I've thought about. So I've worked in this field for nearly 3 decades, or been engaged in service learning. And when you talk about different generations and how things change, it, you know, when I first went into this work, it was pre-internet days. So part of my motivation was just to raise awareness of social justice issues, you know, help people have a better understanding of kind of the themes across society that lead to the need for service in the first place. And, you know, the internet comes into play, and that doesn't matter as much anymore. The information's out there, it's very clearly available. But what I found once the internet and social media came into play more, I never expected this, but part of my job was just giving people face-to-face contact with other human beings, you know, and helping people to have the idea that the opportunity to have relationships when they're so centered on a digital world. And then most recently, at least here in the United States, I've found that part of the focus is about trying to break down political divisions that exist in our society by giving people the chance to meet people who wouldn't be in their own little bubble, their own little social media bubble or their school bubble, whatever it might be, and helping people to have relationships and conversations with people who don't necessarily think like they do. While at the same time, most recently, as I alluded to in my presentation, also trying to address mental health challenges facing young adults that are a result of having grown up in a digital world where they have not had as much face-to-face contact. So I appreciated your kind of landscape of generational differences, and it just made me reflect upon and think about how this field has changed over time, and in my own life experience of it as a result of how society has changed more broadly.
Thank you, Michelle, for that insights. Yeah, I think what struck me most in these 4 presentations is that I realized that our young students, maybe engage in service learning, but it's not anymore normal to, because I remember many of the students would aim for higher grades. Not so they're so competitive, and it becomes the desire to get a very good grade and get an honor and have a very impressive curriculum vitae. I didn't realize that if this is something that motivates you, then it's interesting. It's diminishing the very purpose of your existence. So, what a powerful thought I realized, because whether like it or not, I think I have a number of students who have that desire to really focus on that motivation. Okay, all right. And any thoughts from the others, please?
Maybe I can reflect here.
Yes, Barrett, go ahead.
We have just at the university we have hosted the virtual a delegation of the Rhodes University that's also in South Africa, and they their students have won the McJanet Prize of the Talwa Network, and so we hosted them here. And something that emerged for me in our connection is that first we had to go to extreme collaboration and organization to be able to have a dual conference, in the sense that we had a physical congregation of students, a few, we were less than 50, but we also had this big virtual component where we could connect across the globe. And but I found the hunger in the students for connection, for collaboration, where we first put them in a plenary room with the social distancing and adhering to all of that. They yearned to get to the small rooms to get into smaller groups for connection, and in the tea times, the networking among the students was something that emerged as immensely precious, and how that inspired them for networking and for learning through service learning. It is amazing the hunger that there is now for the personal connection, relationship building.
La verdad es que yo creo que el contexto también pandémico nos ha traído como nuevos retos, o sea, que también nos ayudó a mirar.
Pandemic has brought about new challenges. It has also enabled us to have a different view on our own reality. And all the good things about networking through the digital networks also shows us the barriers that we have to connect to others. This is a completely different type of connection. And the truth is that I believe that when we talk about integral education, when we talk about hands, head, and heart, we are talking precisely about this, how we view ourselves as integral individuals. And there, I believe that we need to take a leap forward in service learning, and we need to look at the educational community as a learning community. All of us learn. All of us need to grow. All of us need to connect. The methodology should not only be just a reflection of students on their own experiences, it should also provide a space for collective reflection in the community, but also reflection for faculty and all collaborators in the university. It is the university as a whole that stands up and says, here I am to build something different. And this implies a new institutional culture. I feel that in Portugal, right now, that is a challenge, because on the one hand, we are aware of this need and we are working along these lines, but this is something new. We were already doing this, but it didn't have this name. Now it has this name. but everybody takes for granted that this is a reality that we want to live in, and we want to have this reality both inside and outside the university. That is why I was talking about this, that should be for all, not just for some. And I want to thank you because I really loved your messages. Karen's experience fills me with interest and curiosity to learn more about how you are doing this, how you establish this relationship between service learning and the scholarship part, and Michelle, that also showed us the wealth of research that speak about the experiences lived. And now my personal contribution is that you said that you were the first one to change. And I think that transformative learning starts in ourselves. And so thank you for all those comments.
Wonderful statement. Start with the personal change for societal transformation. All right. All right. So any other thoughts from the panel?
I'm curious, since we have people from around the world, South Africa, Portugal, Philippines here, James had made a statement that really rang true for me in the United States. And he said, he talked about how we live in a rational material age that has, pushed our higher ed institutions to be more like corporations, and education becomes a means for economic success. And I'm curious if that resonates for others who are here from various places around the globe, because to me, that is a really interesting part of service learning, like that idea of, if students feel that their time all has to be used very efficiently toward the purpose of economic success. Well, service learning is not an efficient use of time necessarily, but is so important for helping people to become all they are meant to be in the world. So curious what others think on that particular thing that James said.
Yeah. The others, I think in the case of the Philippines and De La Salle University, we operate in a trimester, so it's about 3 to 4 months, and it's a very short period of time, and of course that the time efficiency will always be an issue. So, but we always believe that of course helping communities in need is a process, and therefore we should take time to be able to internalize you value what you're doing rather than do it in a more efficient way, a more economic way. I think so. It's a challenge because of the time limitations, and therefore you have to comply with it. Otherwise, you will have some logistical problems. But I think we're facing that same problem of making it more efficient, timely, and economical. How about the others? Okay, that's a wonderful question, Michelle.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I also would like to add that I have learned so much in this panel discussion, because before the discussion, I first networked online and looked at the research of the different panelists, and was amazed to see how at the heart everything is connected and roots to the same. Yes, but with regards to the economical impact, yes, and it's wonderful also to see that we have a connection in Professor Dwight Giles, because he was also one of the champions within the PhD. And so, yes, and learning from them is that it seems that higher education should reframe how they think about training the next generation of global citizens, in the sense of including the heart and not only the head and the hands, for learning for earning, but learning for making a difference in society for us to create a better future for all. And yes, we can also reflect and ask, so to date in South Africa, has this really, the fact that we have included service learning, I'm speaking specifically at our university, that we have included service learning into the curriculum and that we have institutionalized it, it has definitely made a difference in our students, and specifically having community engagement as a graduate attribute at the university, creating the awareness. And I've also read in some of your work that I've read, it is opening the eyes of the students. All of them, with their first interaction with service learning, they say, my eyes have opened. And so it really opens their minds and their hearts. And we are also seeing that a lot of the students comes, the concept of in being engaged and being holistically development, having that, it applies to the rest of their life. They stay engaged. Yes, so.
Thank you, Karen. We still have 2 minutes, maybe a final word from each, from all the panelists, final words. We only have 2 minutes left. We'll start with, yeah.
Sí, solo
Ana,
respondiendo a Michelle muy rápido. Yo, la verdad es que yo creo que James,
I think that I agree with James to a certain extent, although he has presented his statements as firm truth here, but I think that there is this materialistic view in universities, perhaps not as companies, but as the result of this convergence or this competition that exists in the field of education, because both public and private universities need to strive for survival. And also in our own generation, the parents of youth today, because we went through this stage in which we had to achieve certain socioeconomic status and make money or achieve some wealth in order to be able to have a pleasant life. Perhaps this is not such an absolute truth. There is also an internal pursuit inside universities to do something else. That is why we see this open-mindedness to service learning. Universities also feel that something has to change, although sometimes they don't know what that should be. And just let me thank you.
A few seconds, Michelle, and then Karen.
Unos segundos, Michelle, y luego Karen. Quiero agradecerles a todos. Ha sido una experiencia maravillosa tener esta perspectiva global. Yo sé mucho de aprendizaje de servicio en Estados Unidos, pero no había...
Anna and Karen and James, and for your presentations, and Marlon for bringing in your perspectives as well.
Karen?
Yes, I share appreciative inquiry. So, and one of the principles is words create worlds. And the words that have been spoken here speaks about the world that has been created through service learning across the globe. And I think the perspective that I want to leave with is that we are moving into a place where we are moving away from knowledge economy, working towards collaboration and not competition, and therefore moving towards knowledge ecology and knowledge democracy. And service learning is an enabler of doing that. Thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative of sharing this space in the panel. I have learned so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me end by saying, I think we still have hope. Our future leaders of this world, there is a service learning that may help change oneself for a societal and global transformation. So having said that, I think this is very timely. The hands, the head, and the heart should work together for a better future and a better world. Okay? So thank you so much, everyone. Stay well, and looking forward to more collaboration in the near future. Thank you, Uniservitate, for the opportunity. Okay, so with that, we're signing off, and God bless us all. Okay, thank you.